So now that we have the materials, we can actually start creating the actual crafting bench. And it's going to have some of the same functionality as our inventory, but there are some things that should be a little different because we need to set it up in a different way when we create the slots, for example. But for now, we can go to our inventory here, right click on it and duplicate it. And we can rename the inventory to crafting bench. And then move it all the way up just under the inventory here. So most of these things is correct, but we don't need the inventory script. We need to create a new script for setting our stuff up. So we can right click on the inventory script and remove component, so that we have a crafting bench with like images, canvas group, and all these triggers here. Then we need to go to our scripts, and we need to go to the let's just leave in the script folder, and then we need to right click here, click create, and select the new C# script. And this script should be named crafting bench or something. It's like that. And then you can double click on the script to open it up. So in here we need to do some different things. First of all, our crafting bench or workbench or whatever you want to call it should inherit from our inventory, because it needs some functionality from there. So we can start inheriting from inventory and saving this, and then we can delete these two, start and update. So let's just save this for now and then go back into Unity and then select the crafting bench and then take the crafting bench script and drag it onto the bench here. So now you can see we have these available from the inventory script, and the reason that we have all these available is simply because we inherited from the inventory script before by creating that colon inventory here. So now we're inheriting, so we're getting everything from the inventory. So the next thing we need to do is to set up this. So what I've done, you can of course make it larger or smaller or whatever you want to, but I'm gonna go with the same size as Minecraft. It's a long time since I've played Minecraft, but I think it was like 3x3, those crafting bench we had there as usual. So I'm gonna go with 3 rows, and I'm going to have 9 slots, and the slot padding should be 2, and the size should be 25 or something. Then we need to set the canvas group, and the canvas group is attached to the bench itself, so you can just take the bench and drag it all the way down here to the canvas group set here. And fade time, I'm just going to leave it at 0 for now. So if we run our game, let's see what happens. Of course it's going to be in the same spot, so we need to move it. So basically you can select the crafting bench here, select the scene, and then move it a little to the right or something of the inventory, so we have it, so we don't have it on top of the inventory. And we don't have any button right now to open or close it. So what we can do is that we can set the canvas alpha to 1, and when we do that, we'll be able to see the crafting bench from the get-go without opening it. We are of course going to add some functionality later so we can open and close it. So let's try to run it. And as you can see, the bench opens with a size of 3x3. So this is all good and it looks nice, but as you saw in my intro, I had a button down here which I could click on to craft, and I had an extra slot here where I could see a visual representation of the item that I was able to craft by creating the correct combination up here, of course. So let's stop this and jump back into our script, because in here we need to add some functionality for adding those extra things. First of all, we need to add some functionality to the create layout function, because create layout is what is called when we start our game and the slots are placed correctly in front of us in the inventory where we just made those free grid. So basically if we jump to the inventory here and we find the create layout, let's go to definition here. Okay, then we have our create layout function, and it wouldn't make any sense to write the code in here in the inventory Because if we would write the code in the inventory, well, then all inventories will be affected by what we just did. So if we would change something around to add a button in the bottom of the crafting bench or workbench, well, then we would add a button to the bottom of every single inventory, our chest, our normal inventory, and so on, and our character sheet for that matter. And we don't want a craft button in the bottom of all those. So we need to be able to add some functionality from within our craft bench script. So to do that, we can make this create layout function virtual. So if you haven't made this one virtual already, then you need to write public virtual void in front of the create layout function inside the inventory script. If it's already virtual, then don't do anything. I just can't remember if we did this in an earlier tutorial or if this is something I just added myself when I was playing around. So yeah, make sure it's virtual, because when something is virtual, we are able to override in another class, which means that we can add functionality to it or we can override it totally. So if we go back to the craft bench, and because it's virtual, I can write public override, and then I can find the create layout function here and override it. So if I would remove this base create layout and save, then you'll see when we run our game here, because our crafting bench has a crafting bench script on it, well, then nothing is going to happen here, because the inventory's create layout function is never called. And the reason it's not called is because it just out-commented this base.create layout. So we would like to have the normal layout function put everything up for us, and then we want to add some extra functionality to it. So we still need to call the base create layout, because the base is the inventory script, and the base function in this matter here is the create layout inside the layout script, inventory script. So if I would remove those outcomment things and save and run my game again, then you'll see that the inventory has been set up properly now, because I called the base function. So this is the smart thing about overriding. We can call it, and then we can add more functionality here, down here, without affecting any other scripts than our own crafting script, or crafting bench script. So instead of just writing directly inside our inventory, we'll do it here to make it only affect this specific crafting bench. So I'm going to take this step by step to make it easier for you to understand what we're doing. So the first thing we need to do is to be able to take the rect and make it bigger. So when we run our game here, you'll see we need to make the background here larger. It needs to be bigger down here so that we can actually add our button underneath here without having it floating in the air. So the background needs to be bigger. And the background is based on the inventory rect. And I would like to access the inventory rect from my crafting bench. So if I would write inventory rect here, I'm unable to access it. And the reason is I'm unable to access it is because that it's maybe private or maybe public. So if we go back to the inventory script here and go all the way to the top, then under variables here, we'll see that we have something called inventory rect, I think. If I could spell correctly. There we go. It's right in front of me. I just couldn't open my eyes apparently. So private rect transform inventory rect. As you can see, it's private and we can't access it because it's private. If we make something public, we can access it from outside the script if we have an instance of the object. But we want to be able to access it from a class that inherits from it. So to make functionality available from classes that inherit, we can use the accessor called protected. So if I change this one to protected, I'm only able to access it from inside the inventory class itself and inside classes that inherit from it. So people from outside or script from outside can't just access it. We need to be a part of the inheritance hierarchy. So if we save this and we jump back into our crafting bench, now I should be able to access inventory rect. As you can see here, it pops up because it's protected now. And then I can set size with current anchors and we are going to set the vertical axis first, rect transform axis vertical, and it's simply going to be what is it, inventory height, which we also need to access. So we can't access the height of the inventory right now, so we need to make it public. So we jump back into the inventory and find the height. It's right there. So instead of making it private, we can simply write protected, sorry, like that. And then we save, then we jump back into the other script and write inventory height plus slot size, just here, and we need to add the slot padding top multiplied by 2. Okay, so what did we just do? Well, we made sure that the height of the inventory, we use set size recurrent anchors to set the vertical axis, which is the from top to bottom, and we are setting it as the normal height of the inventory, which is the height we already have with those 3 slots in it. And then we are going to add the slot size again to get 1 more row, and then the slot padding top multiplied by 2, so we get the gap between them, that extra little gap between the slots. We also add that. So this line of code will actually just set the correct size of the inventory. So if we save this and jump back into Unity and run the game, you will see that there should be some extra space underneath now. And as you can see, we have the extra space to add in our stuff underneath here now. So in the script again, we need to add some more functionality. We need to add that button. So we're going to create a button here, game object, what do we call it, craft button. So this is the button we need to click whenever we craft an item. And down here we can say craft button equals, and we should instantiate this from the outside, so we can actually create a public game object up here called craft, what should we call it, prefab button, and let's save this. So when we have that prefab button, we can say craft button equals instantiate prefab button, and we need to cast this to a game object, don't we? Okay, I guess we don't need to do that in Unity 5 anymore. Nope, fine. So now we are going to set that craft button here as that prefab button we are going to create in our Unity editor soon. So we're going to create a button that looks like one, so we can set the looks of it before we actually instantiate it. Then we need to make a reference to the rect transform of the button. So rect transform button rect equals craft button that get component rect transform. And then we can set the name of the craft button. Name equals craft button. And remember, we need to make sure that the button is a child object of the crafting bench, because it's inside a canvas, and if it's not inside the canvas, then we can't see it visually in our game. So we need to say craft button dot transform dot set parent, and the set parent is this dot transform dot parent. So because this is sitting on the exact object we need. So now that we have set the correct parent, then we need to set the position as well. So our craft button dot local position, sorry, not craft button, what is called button rect dot local position equals inventory rect plus new vector 3, and then we need to set it at the correct position. So we need to set it at slot padding lift minus slot padding top multiplied by 4 minus slot size multiplied by 3. And I'm not going to explain all these, but basically this is just gonna set it at the correct position on the what's it called crafting bench, and it's inventory rect dot local position, of course. Here we go. So this line basically sets it at the correct angle, the correct amount to the left and the correct amount to the right, and so on, so it fits. When we have put it at the correct position, then we need to set the size of the button, both the width and the height. So the width is going to button rect, and that's set size with current anchors, and it's going to be rect transform dot axis dot horizontal. So we're going to set the width of it, and we're going to do this saying slot size multiplied by 2, because the width should take up 2 slot sizes, and we need to add the padding in, so plus the slot padding lift multiplied by 2, because there are 2 slots and we need to add the padding 2 times, and multiplied by inventory manager dot instance dot canvas dot scale factor to get the scale factor correctly, so it fits all resolutions. So that's the width of it here. You can zoom it out so maybe you can see a little more. It's easier for you if you need to write it off like this, then you can always pause the video. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is to set the height. So button rect dot set size with current anchors, and we need to set the rect transform dot axis dot vertical, I guess, yeah. And then we need to set the vertical size is 1 slot, so that's the slot size multiplied by inventory manager dot instance dot canvas dot scale factor. There we go. So now we have set the width and the height of this button we're going to create in a moment. And then we need to set the event of the button, but okay, we will wait with setting the event. We'll do that in a moment when we need to add some functionality. So that was the button. So let's try to save this and add a button. We can simply go to our button canvas, and we can take the save button and we can duplicate it and call it craft, and then we can just move it here to the side so we can see it, and then you can set it up with the colors that you want. So I want mine to be kinda gray like this, and I want the text inside the button. By clicking the text, you can expand the craft button, click the text here, then you can find some, I'm going to find some yellowish color just like that, and then I'm going to change this text to craft and change it to a bold. So you can take this craft button and go to your prefabs, and here you can take the craft button and you can drag it down there as a prefab and then delete it from the scene. So now we have the craft button down here as we wanted. So when you've done that, you can select your crafting bench, and as you can see, there is a prefab button here in the empty slot, and we can take our new craft button and drag it all the way over to this prefab button. When this is done, you can play the game. Let's see what happens. And you can see the crafting button is placed somewhere wrong actually. And the reason that it's placed wrong is because we need to set the correct anchors, which I forgot. So let's stop this and pull the crafting button back into our game here and place it under any canvas. And if you can see here and you select the top right tool here, you can take this pivot point here, the blue point, if you select your craft button, and move it all the way to the top left corner of the button. So if you do that, then everything should be better now when we place it in a moment. So take the craft again and pull it onto your prefab and delete the craft here inside the scene. So if you couldn't see your button, it's because you didn't place it under any canvas. You always need to place your objects under a canvas to be able to see them. Or not all objects, but of course your UI objects. Let's try to run it again. And as you can see now, the button has been placed right, but the text is wrong. And the reason that the text is wrong is of course also that we need to set the pivot point of that one and the anchor point. So let's take the craft button one more time. I could have done this at one go, I just forgot it. And if we select the text, see that its pivot point here is in the middle, and if we place it in the top left corner here, everything should be fine now when we take the craft button and pull it back in and delete it from the scene and run it again. And there's still a problem. I think we also need to set the anchors, so let's stop running our game. And for the last time, let's give it one more go. Let's find the craft button and select the text here. And let's try to put the anchors, select this anchor preset thing in the rectangle transform, and then select the one in the top, like in the lowest bottom right corner here, so that it stretches with the button. And then create the prefab one more last time. There we go. And let's try again, see if we need to fix some more. And there we go. So now the crafting text is written on top of the button here that we can click to craft our items. And I think it's placed pretty okay in the middle here. So the next thing we need to do is to create the slot. Then needs to go right to it here. Actually, there's one more thing I want to do. When I look over here, the crafting button here is not a child object of my crafting bench. So I need to set that as well. So to be able to set that, I need to go back into my script. And in here, I simply need to write craft button.transform that set parent transform.parent. So the reason that not transform the parent, just transform. So the reason that I'm setting it as the parent up here is because it's easier to position all these things when it's a child object of the canvas, and then after I'm gonna set it as a child object of the crafting bench. If I would do this first up here, then it would be placed at the wrong position. So I need to do it down here. Okay. So if we save this and jump back into Unity, everything should be fine, and the button should be placed correct and everything on the right position, and it's a child object of the crafting bench, as you can see. Okay. Now that we have done that, we can start adding our slot to the script. Because when we run our game, we actually need a little slot next to it, because we have craft here, and then we need to add that little extra slot here so that we can see a preview of whatever we are crafting at all times. Because if we don't have that preview, well, then we don't know what we are crafting, or if we can craft anything. So we actually need to go to the top of the script here and make a private game object called preview slot. And this preview slot is simply going to be a normal slot. We're going to add the exact same way we have added all our other slots. So basically we are going to do it like this. We're going to go down here under in our create layout, and we are going to say preview slot equals instantiate inventory manager dot instance dot slot prefab to get the correct prefab to instantiate it with. Then we need to get access to the rect transform, so we're going to say rect transform slot rect equals preview slot that get component slot rectangle, or not slot, yeah, rect transform, that's what it's called. Okay, when we've done that, we can set the name of the preview slot. So preview slot dot name equals preview slot. Then we need to set the parent again. So we're going to say preview slot, the transform that set parent, and we are going to say this the transform the parent exactly the same way as before. And then we're going to set the position, and the position of the preview slot in the far right corner. So we're going to say slot rect dot local position, I guess. There it is. Equals inventory rect dot local position plus new vector 3. So it's the inventory's position plus a vector 3, so that we place it correctly as we did before. And that position should be 3 slots to the right. So we are going to add the slot padding left multiplied by 3 plus the slot size multiplied by 2 to move it 2 slots to the right. And basically the position of the height, the y-axis, it's going to be the same as our button, so we can just copy paste this up here from our button down here. So it's slot padding top multiplied by 4 minus slot size 3. And I'm missing parentheses here. Yes, okay. So that's the position. I know this is a little boring, but we need to do this before we can actually do the fun part. We also need to set the size, and the size should basically just be the slot size. So it should have the same size as the other slots. So I can say slot rect, set size with current anchors, rect transform dot axis dot horizontal slot size multiplied by inventory manager dot instance dot scale factor. Isn't that what it's called? Scale factor. It's on the canvas, of course. So canvas dot scale factor. There we go. And we need to do the same things for both axes. So just copy this one and just paste it underneath here, and then change the horizontal to a vertical. There we go. So now we have set the size of the slot, and then we need to set the parent as well. So we have it underneath the crafting bench. So we can say preview slot transform that set parent this the transform. There we go. So this is the slot and this is the button. Okay, so let's try to save and see what happens if we run the game in Unity. And as you can see, we have a slot here and we have our crafting button as well. So if you're not happy with the sizes of these things or the positioning, well, then you can always go into the script and adjust this by yourself. If you, for example, want your button here to be bigger, or you want your the size of the background here to be larger so that it doesn't go as close to the slot, you can try to maximize and see how it looks. So it doesn't go as close here. You want this one to go further down. Of course, you can go in and adjust that. I'm just going to leave it with this because I don't want to use the tutorial on adjusting all these things. But go in there, adjust the numbers until it fits your needs, of course. Yes, that was about it for setting up the visual part. So now we can start looking at how we can actually craft these items in the next part of the tutorial.